In February 2024, the Welsh Government posted a tweet. NHS staff are doing amazing work to support LGBTQ+ people. We spoke to Dr. Lisa Cordery-Bruce about the incredible work she's doing to help children and young people from the community.
If I had a message for LGBTQ+ young people, it would be, please don't despair. I see a lot of children and young people who are looking at social media, who are looking at events in the news, and it is really, really affecting them. And I would just like to say to them that there is a lot of joy. That there's a lot of joy in the LGBTQ+ community. There's a lot of people that support you. And there's a lot of people that will be there to share that joy with you when you're ready. My name is Lisa Cordery-Bruce. I'm an emotional wellbeing specialist nurse. I work here in Cardiff and Vale Health Board. As part of that role then, I do find that I support LGBTQ+ young people in the community, in school, if ever they need some emotional wellbeing support. So I've helped young people set up their own peer support groups. So they've approached me and they've said that they'd really like some support in school. Schools have been quite willing to do it, but the young people just need a little bit of guidance. With that support, they set up their own training for the teachers, which was amazing. So they themselves taught teachers. They themselves as well did some sessions with other young people as well. They would deliver training from their own perspective, which was wonderful. And also support groups to meet and to have that sort of safe space within the school environment where they can come and talk, be themselves. The Welsh Government's guidance for schools for supporting trans children and young people. What they have been doing, quite rightly, is involving children and young people, stakeholders, teachers, parents, members of the community in this guidance. I've helped a little with engaging with children and young people to take part in the consultation, which gives children and young people the respect, the individuality and adheres to the UNCRC children's rights that they are entitled to.
Dr. Lisa Cordery-Bruce is a member of the Welsh Government's LGBTQ+ expert panel. The reaction of Dr. Lisa Cordery-Bruce to the release of the final report from Dr. Hilary Cass was to repost a tweet stating, "Fuck the Cass review." Another member of the Welsh Government's LGBTQ+ expert panel, Sophie Quinney, is the lead clinician at the Welsh Gender Service, and she signed a letter composed by the Feminist Gender Equality Network. The letter stated, "We regard the Cass review as methodologically unsound, appears biased despite its reasonable-sounding language, dangerous and right-stripping in its proposals. If implemented, its recommendations will cause great harm to trans and non-binary young people. This report should be rejected. Trans children and young children deserve so much better." The director of the Feminist Gender Equality Network is gender studies academic Sally Hines, who has tweeted, "The theory that everyone has a gender identity is called feminism. Gender identity is required by queer theorists to dissolve the binary opposition between male and female, which is regarded as hierarchical and therefore oppressive." As Susan Cox explains.
So queer theory basically problematizes what's called the binary opposition. For example, man versus woman. Queer theory argues that binary oppositions are inherently hierarchical, in that one term is privileged over the other as the primary, and the other term is merely its deviant or derivative. For example, man is primary and woman is merely the negation of man. For example, in psychoanalysis, women were theorized as being merely the lack of the penis. So queer theory argues that we need to deconstruct all of these social binary oppositions. For example, man versus woman, heterosexual versus homosexual, natural versus artificial, nature versus culture. And we do this through the strategy of queering. And queering is basically a strategy of conceptual and categorical border transgression, in which each category becomes essentially meaningless and not distinct from the other. For example, if we take man and redefine man as not being a male person, but whoever feels like a man, then we've queered that category and is no longer distinct from woman. And this is seen as a progressive movement in getting rid of social oppression. Because queer theory views oppression as springing not from one class of people subordinating another and exploiting them for labor and resources for their material benefit, but oppression comes from this very act of labeling these groups in a binary fashion, which is seen as restrictive and oppressive, and people cannot express their authentic selves in this binary opposition. So when oppression is seen not as arising from these material relations of power, these class relations, but instead the labeling of these relations in a binary fashion of putting people into these groups of categories, then it really drops power out of the equation. For example, Judith Butler, in her seminal text, Gender Trouble, which came out in 1990, at the beginning of the third wave of feminism and was hugely influential to the third wave, she argues that patriarchy is, she celebrates the fact that the term patriarchy has lost currency in recent feminist theory, and that we cannot identify males as a class as the oppressors of females, because this is too totalizing a gesture. And actually, this is not how it works, but oppression springs from these discursive structures of binary oppositions. And if we identify males as the oppressor class, that only works to strengthen the binary opposition.
In the absence of any response from the Welsh Government to the Cass report, Conservative member of the Senedd Darren Millar tabled a motion for debate on the 1st of May 2024 to propose that the Senedd, number 1, notes the Cass review commissioned by NHS England to make recommendations on how to improve NHS gender identity services, which highlighted that there should be extreme caution in prescribing puberty blockers and hormones to under 18s due to a lack of high-quality research into their long-term effects. Number 2, welcomes the fact that due to NHS England stopping puberty blockers, this has resulted in there being no pathway for under 18s in Wales to receive puberty blockers. Number 3, calls on the Welsh Government to adopt the recommendations of the Cass review and ensure that children and their parents are supported with common sense, fact-based guidance. Jane Hutt tabled an amendment. Delete all and replace with to propose that the Senedd 1. Notes the publication of the Cass review. 2. Notes that NHS Wales commissions gender identity services for children and young people 17 and under from NHS England. 3. Notes that NHS England has concluded that there is not enough evidence to support the safety or clinical effectiveness of puberty-suppressing hormones for the treatment of gender dysphoria in children and young people at this time. 4. Notes the Welsh Government will continue to develop the transgender guidance for schools, taking account of the Cass review and stakeholder views. Jane Hutt has an interest in ensuring that from a feminist perspective, gender identity continues to be promoted. She wants a feminist government and a feminist Wales. In the Annex to the International Policy and Practice Report, created by Cardiff University academic Alison Parkin as part of the Gender Equality Review, it states, gender. Throughout the report, gender refers to one axis of social and economic stratification and not to biology. The social processes of gendering are constructed and carried through an oppositional binary whereby differently valued attributes, skills and behaviours are ascribed to men and women. Gender is an active process in which we are impelled to perform the signs of masculinity and femininity, which vary over time and context, to be intelligible to ourselves and to others. If we consider that gender, like class, is a social dimension of inequality, then an egalitarian society must seek to address imbalances in social, economic and political power between men and women in their personal and public lives. This exceeds an individualized conception of protected characteristics. To consider the outcome of institutional systems and practices that produce advantage and disadvantage through the gendering of organizations, society, economy and culture. Gender equality, equality for women and men, acknowledging that the social processes of gendering have negative impacts on women and men. Latterly, postmodernists, feminisms, queer and trans theories have argued that on the way to creating a level playing field, the gender binary should be challenged, disrupted, and the fluidity of gender identities recognized. Gender identity is being pushed for political purposes. For her vision of a feminist Wales, Jane Hutt needs gender identities to be recognized.
I'm pleased to make the statement celebrating International Women's Day, marking the 20th anniversary of this Assembly, established under the Government of Wales Act 1998, which also placed duties to have due regard to equality of opportunity in our statute book. Equality is enshrined in the DNA of the Welsh Government through the legislation which underpins our existence. Equality and human rights are central to the work of the National Assembly for Wales and the Welsh Government and our vision for Wales. We believe in fair treatment of every person, especially those who are most marginalised by socio-economic factors, prejudice and discrimination. We work towards a more equal Wales and to ensure fairer access to services and support opportunities for all. International Women's Day provides the opportunity to reflect on achievements that have been made during the past 20 years, including pioneering policies and leading legislation on violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence, and the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. It also provides the opportunity to take stock of the distance we still have to go to achieve equality in Wales. The World Bank has reported that there are 6 countries in the world where women enjoy an equal legal footing to men, and Britain is not one of them. We know that this is the case from the Equality and Human Rights Commission and Hutt State of the Nation report, but we can and are taking steps to put Wales ahead in our 4 nations and indeed in the world if we make this a priority of the Welsh Government. The theme of International Women's Day this year is Balance for Better. From grassroots activism to worldwide action, we're entering a period of history where the world expects balance. We notice its absence and celebrate its presence. The Welsh Government now has more women than men in Cabinet addressing previous gender imbalance. The work of the Welsh Government Gender Review will contribute to this balance by looking at areas where we can make improvements and become a leader in advancing women's equality to eradicate the stubborn inequalities that still exist. The review is considering the added impact of having another protected characteristic, for example, disability, race or sexuality, has to gender equality. This consideration will enable us to embrace an intersectional approach to policies and priorities. Consultation and workshops steered by Hutt Expert Advisory Group have resulted in a vision for Wales to proclaim today. A gender-equal Wales means an equal sharing of power, resources and influence for all women, men and non-binary people.
The Welsh Government have completely bought into postmodern ideas pushed by academia, and it is having a catastrophic impact on Welsh children. In NHS England, there is at last some pushback. In NHS Wales, it is a different story.